Alrighty, next I have some frequently asked questions. And by that I mean not by students. These are the frequently asked questions by QCA as QCAA into your external exams. So analyze, this is basically a cognitive verb review that I'm going to do with you guys. Analyze dot points are super common. Anytime you're doing an analytical essay, the entire thing of 1,000 words that you're writing is focusing on this one dot point right here. The whole point of analyze is not to regurgitate the plot. The whole point of analyze is not to, describe the events that have happened historically. And it's not to, like, give. Oh. Sorry, guys. It's not just to give definitions for any, like, scientific topics. Across the board, if you are required to analyze a topic, you are breaking that topic down into all of its sub features. So if again I'll take it in the context of English and literature because it's the most universal subject for all of you. If you need to analyze a theme, you cannot just be like word for word recapping all of the events where that theme appears in the story. You need to take an event, break it down into these are the character interactions. This is the surrounding that it's in. These are the aesthetic devices that was used. There was imagery, symbolism, characterization, hyperbole, juxtaposition, all of those buzzwords that English teachers love to use. Break them down. And then this was the significance of all of them. Juxtaposition helped to convey blah, 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 blah. The symbolism used positioned the audience to blah, 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 blah. The author's use of imagery was effective in blah, 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 blah. Every single thing that you break down must have a significance connected to it. And then at the end of everything, tie everything together and synthesize all of that information. So you've got here dissect to ascertain and examine parts and their relationships. So break down or examine in order to identify essential elements, features, and components of structure and determine the logic and reasonableness of information. It goes beyond just explaining and describing something. It's trying to find the meaning behind why certain things are included in a particular topic. And now, if you've done English, you've probably looked at this verb to death, but I cannot. Sorry, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have this verb like understood confidently. A couple of others that are important for you to know: apply, appraise, and appreciate come up quite a bit. Apply basically just means use any knowledge or content that you may have learnt in Unit 3 and 4 to this new scenario that we're about to give you, so you can make connections and things like that. So use knowledge and understanding in response to a given situation or circumstance. Appraise is a really, really interesting one. I've only ever seen appraise come up in the sciences, most notably biology. There's 2 of them. But appraise basically means to evaluate the worth of something. So you may be given, as an example, appraise the use of PCR as a biotechnology. What that basically means is you have to write whether or not PCR is effective or useful or completely useless as a biotechnology. You need to be talking about strengths and weaknesses. You need to be talking about limitations. You need to be talking about improvements that can be made, and then an overall conclusion as to whether or not it's useful. So appraise marks, questions with appraise in them are usually worth a couple of marks because that one verb has about 3 or 4 steps that you need to know to get the full marks to the question. Appreciate is very similar to appraise, but it requires a little bit less detail. Appreciate is to make a judgment about something, or understand fully. So if you are able to appreciate something, you've got enough knowledge of the concept to explain it to somebody and then talk about its strengths and weaknesses as well. Here are some other commonly asked questions, I should say. Calculate, super simple one. It's just to use a formula to arrive at a solution. This one I've only ever seen being used in maths, chemistry, and physics. So if you're able to use a formula properly, then calculate sort of you've got it under the bag. Compare and contrast are connected but very different in terms of the way that you write the question. If you are asked to compare two things, actually, no, I will start with contrast. If you are asked to contrast two things together, you are only listing the similarities and the differences between the two things in the question. So display recognition of differences by deliberate juxtaposition of contrary elements. Show how things are different or opposite. Give an account of the differences between two or more items in situations, referring to both or all of them throughout. How that translates into the external, if you have a contrast question and it's worth, 3 marks as an example, all 3 marks have to be a similarity or a difference that you're mentioning. Compare, on the other hand, is like a step up from that. This time around, it's to display recognition of similarities and differences and recognize the significance of these similarities and differences. So by display recognition, it's identifying them, but you're also giving a reason for the similarity or a reason for the difference. So for example, if I was asked to compare two things, just trying to think of an example off the top of my head, comparing the processes of like R selected versus K selected species in biology. Basically R selected species are the ones who reproduce asexually, K selected species reproduce sexually. If you wanted to compare the differences, one difference is that R selected species have a very short lifespan, K selected species have a very long lifespan. That's one difference. That'll get you 1 mark. The reason for that is R selected species are usually used to populate an area very quickly. So if they have a short lifespan, it usually means that they have really fast reproductive cycles. So within a very small amount of time, the species population is going to grow. That's useful. K-selected species, on the other hand, are much more stable with their populations and don't need to grow in population really quickly, so they can have a longer lifespan. Unless you gave that reason at the end of your response, you wouldn't get that second mark. And what I want you to do is, if you are doing any sciences in particular, pay attention to all of the dot points that have compare on them and make sure that when you're writing your notes, you've listed similarities and differences along with the significance and the reason for the similarity and difference as well. That's the only way that you're going to be getting, the marks that you need to give. The final one that I want to go through with you guys is define. So define is a super easy one to learn because every single defined dot point, the definition that you need to know is given in the glossary of the subject that it comes from. So again, at the end of the bio syllabus, you've got all of the definitions that you need to know. I'll actually screen share to the bio syllabus and run you guys through it. So here, I will be able to look through these topics and define polygenic inheritance and predict the frequencies of genotypes and phenotypes for using 3 of the possible alleles. So polygenic inheritance is a concept that you learn with in genetics. If you go down to the bottom of the syllabus, so just scroll down here, it's got the glossary for all of the important terms in the document. If I go down to P, the QCEE definition for the term is right there. What I strongly recommend that you do is stick all of these into a Quizlet and then just learn them off by heart. Because I've seen exam questions that come up where it's like, define polygenic inheritance. The only way, unfortunately, that you can guarantee getting these questions like full marks is with the QCEE definition. Strong emphasis on guarantee. Some of the some of the markers might be a little bit nicer and give you marks for like a version of the correct definition, but the only way that you can be safe and get 100% is if you memorize the definitions on the glossary. So I remember I've got a sheet somewhere with all of the bio definitions on there. I'll try and pull it up for you actually. I don't know if we'll see this. Yeah. So biology, I think there's a handful of them across Unit 3 and 4. I copied all of the ones that we needed to know from the syllabus, wrote the QCEE definitions, stuck these onto a quizlet basically, and just reviewed them every single time I did bio revision. Every single time I did bio revision. But yeah, define. This is a nice and easy one to learn, but hard to get the marks for if you don't know what it's asking. All right. The next couple that we've got are sort of higher order in terms of like the cognitive level. We've got discuss, evaluate, and explain. Discuss means that you're looking at the pros and the cons for a particular topic. So examine by judgment, sift the considerations for and against, debate, talk or write about a topic, including a range of arguments, factors, or hypotheses. Consider taking into account different issues and ideas, points for and against, and supporting conclusions and opinions with evidence. So, the key there is that you're talking for and against points. If you're asked to discuss a particular topic, you can't just go with your opinion on it and try and focus on that only. You have to bring in a counter argument or a point of contention or something from the other side, and then finally make a conclusion at the end which one is like the correct answer or which one you think is the correct answer. If you're asked to discuss question and you only give one side of the argument, your maximum marks that you can get is half because you haven't done what the verb is asking you to do. Same thing with evaluate. Evaluate dot points have a very specific way that you need to answer them as well. They are basically make an appraisal by weighing up or assessing strengths, implications, and limitations, make judgments about works, ideas, solutions, or methods in relation to selected criteria, examine and determine the merit, value, or significance of something based on the criteria. In plain English, evaluate is all about strengths and weaknesses, limitations, and then reasons for why things are strengths, weaknesses, and reasons for limitations. Again, it's a little bit more of a higher order skill because you're having to pull things apart and like talk about things like aspects of a topic individually. So yeah, explain on the other hand is a little bit more simple. Make an idea or situation plain or clear by giving it more detail or revealing relevant facts, give an account, and provide additional information. So for any sort of explain dot points, I know that there's a whole heap of explain dot points in the sciences. It just requires you to put all of the relevant content required to understanding a topic into your answer, and you should be able to walk away with full marks. So yeah, hopefully that is all okay. Extrapolate. Okay, truthfully, I've only seen this one in maths, but it's an interesting one to talk about. Extrapolate is infer or estimate by extending or projecting known information. Infer from what is known, extend the application of something, so a method or a conclusion, to an unknown situation by assuming that existing trends will continue or similar patterns will be applicable. Basically, that means that extrapolate questions will ask you to find the rule or relationship and pattern for two variables or like a scenario, for example. So let's say that they gave you the increases in temperature of a particular fridge over the course of a week. You would be asked to, somewhere in that question, would be asked to find the equation or find the relationship between the temperature and the time passed. If you are getting an extrapolate question, it's asking you to use that relationship that you've just found or use the equation that you've just come up with and apply it to a new context. So what will the temperature, if the relationship stays constant between the fridge's temperature and the amount of weeks passed, what will the temperature be in a month's time? I'm so sorry I keep yawning. It's whenever you're staring at a screen and talking to yourself for 2 hours straight, it can be a lot on a person. So sorry guys. Um Once you've done that extrapolation, so you've used the relationship, you found the answer, a good thing, a good habit to get into is making sure that you're using the same units. And then that'll be the question done. Justify. So this is to give reasons or evidence to support an answer, response, or conclusion. It's also to show or prove how an argument, statement, or conclusion is right or reasonable. So if you are justifying something, the really, really important thing is to give reasons or evidence. It's not enough for you to just state a statement with justify. You need to be quoting numbers or data points or quotes from a table, any sort of like evidence that the question has given you, you need to explicitly state, whether that be a percentage or like a measurement of some type. It needs to make its way into the question, or else you're not getting the mark needed. So even if it feels a little bit awkward to mention like numbers explicitly, always put them, even if it's in brackets or like hyphenated halfway through your answer, always include them. It's a good practice to get into doing that just naturally, but especially if it's a justify question. Now we get into recognize. This one's a much simpler one to talk about. Recognize is to identify or recall particular features of information from knowledge, identify that an item, characteristic, or quality exists, and perceive as existing or true. So to be aware of or to acknowledge something. Now, anytime you see a recognized dot point in the syllabus, it literally means to acknowledge that it exists. You don't need to know the information within that dot point in any sort of like higher order detail. At most it'll come up as a multiple choice question in your paper. It's just something that you need to know as a fact. Like you need to just know that statement as a fact. And hopefully that'll be okay.